young and strength was mine, as young men do, I tried to find a dream. With a sun-tanned body and a pair of jeans, the rattle and the roar of the big machines, I found my place with the snowy mountain scheme.
Never before, never after could I have experienced anything like this, what I call heroic time. But to live through that narrow corridor of history is, I think, a privilege which only very few people have had. And I consider myself one of those very privileged people who had, by some chance, the opportunity to share that experience.
I see a Land Rover lobbing into Lob's hole, saw life with a laugh and lots of soul, the years I worked with a snowy mountain scheme. There was color, life and laughter, and to hell with the mornings after, we lived it up with a snowy mountain scheme.
Here, scores of thousands of men and women are seeking a wider future on British soil. Ample literature covering all aspects of Australian life is available.
In the end of 50s, a lot of magazines and newspapers had advertisements in there. And they all said, Australia is calling, Australia is calling. So, of course, we were young fellows, said, let's go to Australia.
We fronted up in Berlin at the immigration office. They interpreted their country to us, which to us looked like paradise. There were these magnificent beaches. There were these lovely kangaroos and wheat fields. Look, half my life I was starving until I came to Australia. And seeing all that, I mean, how could you refuse it?
Today, migrant ships are bringing new settlers to Australia. New lifeblood for our young country.
Suddenly come later and they say, well, in 5 days you're going. That's it. We had nothing. At that stage, being in camps, we had mattresses, few blankets and few clothes. Afterward, we had nothing.
The Snowy came to Bonagilla, to the immigration camp, and collected about 20 of us. But of course then they told us, snowy mountains, like in Europe. And of course when we came to Cooma, I asked, how far to Cooma? This is Cooma. I said, where's the mountains? This is only like foothills, you know, not even mountains.
When we come to Cooma, somebody picked us up, put us on a truck. There was no bus. And they brought us to Jindabyne. There was open paddock, absolutely nothing. No camps, nothing. And we said, well, we're going to sleep. Somebody came in and said, don't worry. About in afternoon, truck come in with the tents and few blankets. And we start building a camp for a night to sleep.
When we saw the Snowy River up in the Gattaga area, it wasn't any water there. Because arriving up there, summertime, so it was already dry. So we looked at each other and we said, going to build a power station for 60,000 kVA? Where is the water for it?
Quasi quasi non si poteva arrivare proprio lassù a Epicep perché era chiuso dalla neve, nevicava. La casa piccola, vuota, scuoteva così dal vento e in giro al battiscope c'era il ghiaccio. E Giulio è andato al lavoro perché era ora di incominciare il turno del night shift. Mi sono messa tutte quelle 2 coperte che avevo messe doppie, triple sopra di me, giusto tenermi caldo, e ho aspettato che venisse Giulio la mattina. La mattina Giulio è arrivato, però non avevo una goccia d'acqua in casa, acqua non ne veniva perché era ghiacciato. Sono andata, è arrivato Giulio che neanche non l'ho conosciuto da quanto era sporco del lavoro. Comunque ha dovuto sciogliere l'acqua in una padella per lavarsi.
I happened to be skiing in Austria and I liked it very much. Then I was a governess in France and I thought, after this I'll go back to Austria. But I told my father and he said, come home, because he said there's snow in Australia. And so I rang them up and they said, yes, come. And we're desperately, everything's go, and we need you in the drawing office, and I went. I became head of the tracing pool, so my job was to train any new girls and sort of supervise the work, and we traced the engineers' drawings, before they went out as plans.
The first time I addressed people outside the employment office, there must have been about 400 of them, and I was a bit frightened, but it went all right. And the next morning the buses went out.
I recall you as being almost the mainstay in the employment office because of the fact that you had the ability to speak all these languages and to communicate with the people who were not able to express themselves in English, and just to see their faces light up when you spoke. And some of these people used to wait up there dressed in their street clothes, Italian handmade shoes, but no money at all, and sleeping on the ground until they could get a job. Because as soon as they got the job, they were right.
Well, I know when Jan and Alex came down from Cowra, they had advertised for carpenters, and so they rushed down and bought some tools, and then they went down to the library and got a book out on carpentry and sat up half the night reading about carpentry. And then when they asked how many carpenters, they put up their hands, and so they were taken on. But the foreman was very generous. He came up to Jan and he said, I don't think you're a carpenter. And Jan said, no. And he said, never mind, I can see you're going to be a hard worker. I'll take you on.
I fronted up at the engineer's office. I can't remember his name. And he said, yes, we need chainmen. I didn't have a clue what a chainman was, whether you would have a chain on your leg and it wasn't that sort of chain. No. My job would be to help the surveyor do his business. We drove with a jeep as far up as we could, and the rest was climbing up the mountains and chopping trees. We held, of course, the famous stick with the divisions on it, and he said left or right, and he did the measuring, and I did only the worker's work. But it was a manly job, and it was a rewarding job, because all the time you had a feeling and the assurance that you were doing something for the country.
My first job was carpenter's laborer. Most of us was absolutely no conversation with any English. At that stage we learned first abusive words and swearing words. We didn't know. If they swore at us, we just smiled and carried on with the job.
I was a miner in Italy, but I couldn't tell them that they just pick you up as labor, see, so they just give you a pick and shovel. So when one miner went to the toilet, I took his jackhammer and started working. And when he came back and he showed me, he went straight up in the office. And he said, I find a new miner. He said, that's the one down there on the job. So they come down and pick me up and put me in the tunnel.
One day, a lady came to me, Laura Brown, who worked for the commissioner, and she asked me, would I be able to draw up an advertisement, a half-page advertisement for the Truth, because they didn't have anybody to do it at the time. And she knew that I had studied graphic design in Berlin. So being fairly bored on the weekends, I spent my whole weekend drawing it and gave it to her on Monday morning. Well, I think the following day already, I was called on the double to Sir William's office, Sir William Hudson. And when he saw me, he looked me straight in the face and said, have you done this? And I said, yes, Sir William. And he said, how come you can do things like that? Have you got your matriculation? I said, yes, of course I have my matriculation. I studied graphic design. And after some severe pause, he looked at me and said, you are wasted as a chainman. And then he picked up the phone and rang the survey office and said, well, we'll transfer Mr. Zimmer to the public relations area, and he will now be classified as draftsman.
You see this tree? This is a landmark where people used to go off to Tengtengara Dam, and this was my first time going to Capramara. I've never forgotten this side. I couldn't believe how many people got off the bus to look for work. I had a job arranged to work in the T2 power station, but many people didn't have a work, and you just had to queue up every day and well, ask for a job. So here we are in the middle of the bush. This is the old campsite from called Section Creek. Most people from here used to work at T2, at the power station, at the tunnels. But Section Creek was such a small camp, it had to be built on 2 levels. And the big steps used to go up here. The winter wasn't very comfortable up here. It was very cold and very isolated. And if you wanted to run away, you couldn't even run away.
My mother was a doctor in the Snowy Mountain Scheme. Being born in Vladivostok, living in Shanghai, she was multilingual. She was only 5 foot tall. She was a little pocket dynamo. Being a doctor, she had a feeling for what was happening in the community. At some time during the time in Cabramurra, she could feel tension in the camp, and she went and spoke to the local policeman that said, look, I think there's potential problems here, and I think we need to look at doing something. And the guy said, well, what do you think we need to do? And Mum's suggestion was to see if we could obtain the services of a couple of the ladies from Cooma. Everything then quietened down. It was great. Dad was in charge of diamond drilling in the Snowy. So they had these various diamond drilling locations that they had to go to. And Dad would take us out if he was going out in the bush somewhere. He'd take us out in the Land Rover. We'd get bogged all the way. We'd be winching ourselves out all the way, and you'd inevitably get home late in the day, absolutely exhausted. I remember on a couple of trips seeing lots of wombats, lots of kangaroos. The wildlife, there was fantastic.
My time in the bush was very recuperative. I grew up in an orphanage. My mother died early. I hardly knew my father. I had no family, as it were. I was always insecure. And here, for the first time in Australia, I could stand on my own feet. I used to do a bit of drawing. I had paper with me, I had pencils and ink with me, and I did a few watercolors. When I came to Australia, gum tree was totally alien. And later on, I discovered that it is the most beautiful tree on earth in all its different shapes and forms.
11 человек, и меня послали строить гидрографическую станцию. Шло дело помалу. Все, что надо было ходить ребятам и тащить на плечах. Сказал, что я знаю подрывную работу. В следующий раз я попросил, чтобы привезли ящик и больше, и детонаторов. То Стэн Боднарский, мой знакомый, тоже, он был оторви голова, а он имел 4x4. Я говорю, Стэн, попробуй. И он поехал до самого ручья. And Stan was taking, please, well, he was carrying detonators and a box of gelignite. If it fell down anywhere, it will blow everything to smithereens. That's the way we worked on Slovak. We used to take risk, and a lot of risk.
We're going to build this dam, and of course, to build a dam, we need to have the dry foundations. And to do that, we have to build a cofferdam to stop the river there, to divert it away from the dam foundations. And I wanted concreting done, you see. And of course, we had to have approval of the concrete, and we had to approval of build a dam, and approval for this and approval for that, you know. So I said, I can't sit and wait for this and run. So I just went ahead. And Mr. Blake had his letter about that the concrete wasn't approved. So before we had finished, in 1955, he looked at his files and he said, you must take it away because it wasn't approved concrete. So we said to him that the modern way of doing things nowadays, been done for years in Norway, I said, was that we just leave them in the dam. Eventually got them talked into to keep it, and the cofferdam is there.
It wasn't always very pleasant. Not so much dust, but noise. And sometimes frightening, of course, because after every explosion when they fired, there was dust and everything could be blown down with water. Lunch, you would see on the side, you had your sandwiches from the canteen, and you would sit here in the rocks and just eat your sandwich and then go again. Falling rocks was one of the major risks in this thing. That's why the safety officer comes always past with long steel bars and bars those loose rocks down. It's just not 100% safe.
Bisognava lavorare e cercare di far sempre di più dell'altra squadra. L'americano con noi si comportavano molto bene personalmente, ma la ditta chiamava progresso. Una squadra cercava di fare dell'altro e fra di noi italiani ce le facevamo perché l'altro non facesse quel che ho fatto io. Voglio dire, c'era delle discordie. Il lavoro per conto mio è stato il lavoro più grande della mia vita, dove ho sofferto più di tutto, in quelle gallerie là. My supervisor there in the tunnel, he told me one day that in America, before he came in Australia, he was a bus driver in New York. So we had to work under a bus driver, see. He was a good friend with me. I was going fishing with him, you know. His wife was a good friend of my wife there. And when we had some party up in Happy Jack, he was there and he was a gentleman. There was no problem against that. But on the work he was an animal. He had to. Otherwise he was losing the job himself, see.
The worst accident I had was the last accident, and I even decided I leave the tunnel. I was drilling, my controls were about 15 feet back, and I just moved back to adjust something, and bang, the firewall came out. I had a lot of injuries, and I think I was the first one out, because the others were lying there with broken legs, and like the fellow next to me, only shoulder on shoulder we stand, he lost both his legs, and
you could have bones sticking out of boots, and you have to get big scissors and cut the rubber to put the bones back a little bit and strap them up, so it could be quite gruesome. But they kept the push on. They had to get the footage. They had to keep on pushing. And after this big accident, the Americans said, okay, you guys, it's been really bad out there, but let's go back inside. If somebody had been killed, you wouldn't have gone back inside. But because nobody was killed, he reckoned, get them back in, keep the production going, and everybody could see the logic of this. And so they all went back in and carried on after that bloodbath,
Sunday evening, we're all at home, and Mum was getting her hair permed, and one of the guys came in and said, there's been a terrible accident at Tumut Pond. Mum immediately got dressed and went charging out into the snow. We didn't see Mum for another 2 days and 2 nights.
There was a very severely injured man with the bad head injuries there, but they also found there was a lady in advanced stages of labour who they had to get to hospital because of potential complications. What was amazing was the lady who was in labour was the wife of the very seriously injured man. And to get out of Tumut Pond, they needed to use a bulldozer to tow the ambulance, which took them the better part of a day to do that. But it took my mother nearly another half a day to get back to Cabramatta.
As she was starting to thaw out, I heard a bit of a screech at one stage when she was getting into the bath. She was wearing some red stockings, so she'd been wearing these all through the snow, so they were saturated. The legs were, they were all red. And then she'd taken off her hat to see her hair was still bright orange and standing straight up. So it was a really, really interesting time. And very, very courageous.
Some guy got run over by the locomotive, He was dead okay, So I had to bring him out, put him in the ambulance, and drove him not down to Gancopen, but up to Jihad Township, where there was a Dr. Baxter there, and I went up there, and that's when I had the biggest fright of my life. I was driving up there, lonely winter's night, snowing, me in the front of the ambulance, the corpse behind me. All of a sudden you hear boom, 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 like the corpse is trying to waken up or say something to me. It's unreal, man. Keep driving, driving, snow, wind, boom, boom. I couldn't stand it anymore. I stopped. I got out and I walked around the back, opened the doors, and he was still lying down the stretcher, but one arm had fallen off onto the floor of the ambulance and it was going boom, 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 boom. So I just put it back and tied it with a bit of bandage and took him up, and we fixed him up, fixed him up for death, up there with the doctor in Jihad Township. I'll never forget that night.
One beer, please, Josephine. Hello, Ulrich. How are you?
Hey, Ulrich. Good to see you.
What a
Pleasure to see you. Same here. Must be 10 years, eh? At least.
It's a long time ago.
When I was on night shift, well, graveyard shift, it was quiet, you know. Unless something bad happened, you had the telephone link up with the tunnel. Something went wrong and somebody was coming out injured, we got on the ball. Otherwise, you didn't go to sleep. You stayed awake. I had a big tape recorder and guitar, brought them down and started writing songs. It was pretty good, you know. My wife could sing a little bit, and I met a tall Englishman called Peter Barry. He worked for the Snowy as a bulldozer driver. So we started singing around the wet canteens, you know, where they served the beer to the miners, and the Commodore and the old hotel in Jindabyne, stuff like that. A friend of mine, Olaf, he was a Norwegian, and he used to operate the bulldozer right outside the first aid post. But unfortunately, a couple of years later, when he was working on the Jindabyne Dam, he went over with his bulldozer, and it flipped, and it killed him. So I wrote this song in honor of Olaf. Olaf, Olaf, along by the snowy river, where Utah made a dam, we remember Olaf Groden, a dozer, driver man. All the experiences I had, a lot of them did involve death. And a lot of them, you know, were ordinary things of workers' lives, the way it struck me. So I wrote quite a lot of songs up there before leaving the mountains. Longer grew the tunnels, short grew Olaf's span. From rock to dust was the savage must with the dozer driver man.
I used to rush home from the afternoon shift, which they used to call swing shift, which finished at midnight. By the time you get to the camp, it's probably half an hour later, because they didn't have modern buses like they had in the last few years, just a truck with a tarpaulin on top. That's how you came out, cold and freezing, into the and then of course the canteen is open all the time for a meal when you come home. But we didn't have time. It's just quick in the shower and off in the car, 3-4 of us, into Kuma. So we got to Kuma usually around 1:45, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then our night started, partying.
One of the best nightclubs was at the Workers' Club, and there was Julian Latray, who was the most fabulous Hungarian. He had a band and he played all that magic gypsy music, and we loved dancing to that. Tindri House was a very good accommodation where the single girls lived. We were allowed to have our friends in at night, and men supposed to go at 10 o'clock, but didn't always work out that way, especially when there was a fire. So many boys jumped out of the windows.
You know, there were a bunch of, a couple of hundred bachelors up there. That was very attractive for the sex industry people from King's Cross in Sydney, of course. And one of the things that we as a staff started to notice was that consumption of food, which we had to supply to the men's kitchen, started to increase beyond what was reasonable. And then we found out that we had that many women living in a camp, you know.
The women used to come and knock on the door when they came last payday, and you had something to do with them. They probably knocked on your door and said, "Dry cleaners here." So
You used these raw reds before?
The which?
Raw reds?
Yeah, they're very good. They make life extremely easy. Mum and Dad were very social people. My father's family had come from Norway and would have lots of large parties for the Norwegian National Day, the 17th of May. We always had parties. And there used to be always a big party for all the drillers and field investigation staff. They used to bring the kegs of beer along, and we would carry glasses around and sit there and listen to the stories of them. And it was obviously a very, very hard life for a lot of them, but they all seemed to enjoy it.
Today is a special day in the lives of the Norwegians working on the snowy scheme. And the flags of Norway and Australia fly side by side in celebration of the King of Norway's birthday. And how better to celebrate it than out on the snowfields, so reminiscent of back home to them.
I myself was president of Selmer Ski Club, and we had cross-country competition and slalom competition, and the highlight was then jumps.
The judges are ready in their box, and there goes the first competitor down the run. They built the jump for themselves in their spare time.
The ski jump, we had to make it. The caterpillar were bringing the snow, and we had a long rope on, and everybody hanging on the rope with the ski and going over and hitting the snow.
But the jump goes on, and here's one that is sheer perfection.
It wasn't just the Norwegians competing there, but we had people from the local ski clubs. It got very popular, so we got an influx of people, and some people never been in the snow before, and they thought it was a wonder, you know, to come there.
During the war, there were enemies on that side and on that side. When we came to Kuma and we met there was no enmity. The Czech didn't say, well, what you Germans did to us, or the Hungarians didn't say that. We were friends all of a sudden because we all had the same aim. Forget the war, be human beings, like one another as human beings, and show that you are civilized people.
Maybe all wise and by the restless and the weary, find safe harbor on our shores.
Oh, yeah. The man with the salami, yeah? You still haven't got the delicatessen, though, because I had a look for it the last time I was here.
Gone, long time
Why?
ago.
It was a good delicatessen.
I gambled too much.
Gambled away.
One particular evening in one particular pub, and all these big guys were drinking all around me, all speaking with these German accents, if not actual German. So I just said, you sound like a bunch of SS men, you know, because I'd had a few beers and I felt brave. And they said, we are SS men, you know. I said, bull. They said, we are, and they showed me their SS signs and numbers, you know, all that stuff. Yeah, you could meet anybody of any sort.
В то время не было политических группировок среди рабочих, только были дискуссии между рабочими. Много было австралийцев, которые очень поддерживали коммунистическую партию. Приезжали со всех уголков Австралии, не только рабочие. Были интеллектуалы, с которыми можно было очень-очень интересно говорить, от которых можно было научиться кое-чего. И результат был то, что мы были связаны. Те, кто интересовался, фактически со всем миром в Австралии.
See, when you work in the tunnel, you're always exposed to some accidents. And that's where I meet my first wife in hospital. He used to come to town, always in suit, dressed up like on a Sunday. You would not dare not go in a jumper or something. Probably looked like a turkey going into town, but everybody was the same.
I met my husband at the cricket club dance. Jan was looking in the window, and he was with a friend, and he said, oh, look, he said, let's go in. He said, there's a girl ready for bed. So as it was a come in bad taste party, which wouldn't be in bad taste today, I was just in some rather nice striped pyjamas, he came in and asked me to dance. He was studying engineering survey, but because he was a chainman, it wasn't easy to get a house. I always remember going to the property office and asking, and she said, you must remember it's like the army. When you marry a private, you don't have as many points, so you have to wait a while. I think I was about 7 months pregnant, and I said, look, if you don't give me a house, I'm going to have the baby, I'll bring the baby and put it in the waiting room, in the pram, until you know, give me a house. And I think that must have stirred them a bit, and we did get a house.
When the wife had a third baby, I wanted to do something nice. Flowers was not available at Jindabyne, so I thought I might surprise her with a song. I went to Kuma radio station to ask to play Russian song. Radio station starting now and again play music in foreigner language, educating people with idea that immigrants are there. Wife thanked me all the same. She didn't hear it, but she was grateful. And I was grateful they did it. And I felt that my future child might be good Australian. With a baby, it was extremely hard. I bought firewood stove, and then we had green fly safes. You put it somewhere in the shade on the wind, and that was our freezer. And the bath was in a big tub. It was a most important item to buy at that stage for washing kids.
Ho chiesto al prete che veniva qualche volta a Epijack se me lo può battezzare, dice sì, così quando vengo per la messa battezziamo il bambino. Non potevamo andare in chiesa perché in chiesa non c'è, no? E quando che veniva per dire la messa andava in questa aula di scuola per dire la messa. E allora dice lo battezziamo in cucina. Sopra il lavandino, se l'acqua cadeva, e ha battezzato il bambino lì.
When I come home every day, I was very happy to see my son there coming to see me, and he want my helmet. And I took him up at the bush and told him that this type of bird that was there, you know, that's all what we had. We had nothing else to do in Epijack there, see.
I remember that all the Jindabyne community had that Christmas party up in the park, up behind the town there on the river, and they had all them swings and roundabouts and things. And they had a fella, Santa Claus on a truck. And then...
that was new to you and to me too. It was new.
That's right.
Here was Santa Claus in the middle of a hot weather, come in dressed up like he was somewhere in the snow.
I remember used to bring back snow in the middle of summer in that little Morris ute you had. You used to pack it up, fill it up with snow and bring it down for us to play in the snow in the middle of summer.
At the Cabramurra School, the children hurtle out for sports afternoon, but to enjoy very different sports from what most Australians have been brought up to. It's a case of all in together this cold weather, and of course that includes old Pooch too.
When we came to Cabramurra, everybody, you know, was on skis. I went to Cubs, and the Cub group in Cabramurra was a ski patrol. You know, we'd do our internal activities and dib and dob. But then we'd go outside and do, you know, sort of routes and runs and whatever. It was great.
And at that stage, Derek thought he was going to become a world champion skier, and so started practicing on some small jumps around the school, but eventually got the courage up to try jumping off the house, which he did with various degrees of success. But when Mum and Dad saw him trying to jump off the roof, they nearly had a heart attack.
The family had a full-time person looking after the two young kids, and obviously Peter and I. Angelina and Mario came and lived in our house and had their own separate little room. We'd come out and have to light the first person up had to light the fire, and then this beautiful aroma of Italian coffee would come through. So we used to sort of pop into their room and have a cup of coffee with them in the morning, and then we'd sneak into Angelina and Mario's bed because it was nice and warm. I don't think they appreciated it that much occasionally.
There was quite a large Italian community in Cabramurra, and about 3 houses down the road from where we lived, the Alfredos had a house, and in the backyard of their house they'd made a bocce court. And one of the early memories I had of the Italian community was watching these people have a great time.
Is ready? Come on, children. Young and old.
Si parlava in galleria, là quando si faceva il smoke, là si parlava e uno ci ha detto, americano ha detto, dice, mangerei un bel piatto di ravioli. No, io ero là, ho sentito e dico, perché non li mangia qua? Dove vado a prendere i ravioli qua? E dico, mia moglie li fa. No? Allora sono venuto a casa e ci ho detto a lei, prepara i ravioli, che viene americano a prenderli, no? Sono venuti in 3 americani a prendere i ravioli e da quel giorno là venivano spesso. Quando sono arrivati a Natale, che loro mangiano il tacchino, tutti e 3 ci hanno portato mezzo tacchino per uno, come facevamo noi in 2 a mangiare un tacchino e mezzo.
I couldn't really cook before I married, and my husband took me over to the camp oven and the camp, and taught me all the things he liked, you know, dumplings and sauerkraut and pork. Jan had a lot of friends, Czech friends from the mountains, and they used to come in the weekends, and we were so, you know, we only had 2 bedrooms and a very, very small house, but they used to sort of sleep on the floor. And when we bought our first car, it was one of those type station wagon cars, and they slept in the back of that even.
Good girl.
A bit of soy sauce there.
Okay. Mum and Dad were both raised in China in households which had Chinese cooks, and both of them used to cook Chinese meals. And one of the big treats we had as children was to have a birthday party, and for them to agree to cook a Chinese banquet for us for a birthday party.
Everybody appreciated Mum and Dad's cooking in Cabramurra because there was very little Chinese cooking going on in Cabramurra in those days. We would also have lots of Russian food and lots of Norwegian food. We loved fish balls, or what's called fiskeboller, and it's done in a white wine sauce with prawns and.
In fact, all the kids love them. Natalie, what do you think of fish balls?
Fairly bizarre cultural mix, though, isn't it?
Yes, you've only got little hands, but still, put it out. That's lovely. Throw it down for them. They're hungry. Oh, that's good, Eva. Here you are. Take another. Dad used to, Jan used to hate the bandicoots. You
And
know?
the wombats.
The wombats, I mean. They destroy all your fences, and you don't know what to do about them. I don't know.
What did he used to do with them?
Well, he used to just keep blocking up the holes with all that wood up there.
Oh, okay.
You know, but that's all we could do, you know. You're not allowed to shoot them, but Well,
No, I
that's
don't
all.
think you're allowed to shoot wombats, Mum.
There were so many different nationalities and mixed marriages, and we were always in touch with Czechoslovakia. Our children grew up with all these children. My son played soccer, and you find many Italians, and his friends today, they just think, well, they're all Australians, you know.
When I came here, I was ostracised because I was a new Australian. In Jindabyne, it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all because all the kids grew up together, so there was no social cut-off or anything like that.
When you come in, I remember you said, don't call me Shura.
Yeah, I remember that. Had a big fight about that.
Yeah, and I smacked him, Evan. I smacked you, Evan. That was one time that I didn't like because you didn't want nothing to do with the past, only with future. But you didn't mention that on Snowy when you was there.
Yeah, well, it was different then.
Yeah, different, yeah. It's man-made.
Sorry about this. Hello. How you going, Danny? Can I call you back, mate? Righto, mate. Sorry about that.
I'm a project manager in the building and construction industry. I have a philosophy when working as a project manager. I like to work with people. I don't like adversarial forms of contract, which are generally the norm in the construction industry. And this does stem back from the way they did things in the Snowy Mountain scheme. The camaraderie that was established between Sir William Hudson and his team and the contractors was something that I've read about, which is something special, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that the Snowy Mountains was so successful.
I've been working now with glass for over 30 years. I have made a name for myself in this country, and I belong to the pioneers of modern glass, studio glass in Australia. You see, these days when you apply for a job, you have to be specifically qualified, sometimes for a very narrow area. In those days, if you had hands and a bit of a brain and feet to stand on, and you said you were willing to, you had a chance. Now, isn't that a great thing? I wish many young people would have a similar chance these days.
Snowy made me understand Australia hard way. Australia is changed and we are changed.
That'll do, thanks.
My outlook changed, but it's not just my outlook. My children's changed. They're really Australians, but actually contributing to Verdenken Australia something different.
I lost my first wife in '77, and then I went back to Europe for 3 months. I thought, now I will see how I feel. I never regretted, because when I came back, I arrived in Sydney at 6:15 in the morning. I took the next flight to Canberra and a taxi to Cooma. And the closer I came home. And I never looked back.
We'll now sing us an old, new Australian ballad. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
From Jindabyne Tunnel and around Isle Bend, the boys go to Cooma, earn money to spend. And we'll buy you a beer there if you happen to see 4 Italians, 3 Germans, 2 Yugoslavs and me.
We pull off in Sharp Street by the Alpine Hotel. You've been to Cooma, you know this place well. And before we get inside, our order rings out. Four vinos, 3 schnapses, 2 slivovitz, 1 stout. Now we may not be diggers, but we'll have you know, we're digging your tunnels up here in the snow. La la la. La 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 la. The barman stood up then with a snarl on his face. He said, you Europeans, you're a flipping disgrace. Stop drinking and queering if you want to stop here. Become integrated, drink our Aussie beer. So we switched on to schooners, to the bar's cheers. St. Paul's, Matilda, and Pickles for hours and hours without any cease. Till he sudden arrival. Now we may not be diggers, but we'll have you know, we're digging your tunnels up here in the snow.
Beginning next week, to mark the 10th anniversary of of the Berlin Wall, impact.
In a furious moment, the whole bar was clear.
That he next.
The Aussies that cheered, so the coppers lumped up then, unfair you'll agree. For Italians, we Germans, to Yugoslavs and me. Now we're back in the tunnel, broke, cause it cost us to bail ourselves free. But before, let me make it clear, it was worth it, Australia, for the sake of your peers. Thank you very much.
Glenn.